There's a industry-wide effort to just get greater visibility into kind of costs at different levels and where different elements of costs are being introduced and what can be done to minimize or drive those down going forwards. The kind of biggest shift we're kind of seeing now is so all medical waste from the time from the time it's generated and bagged to the time it's destroyed has to be tracked and manifested. So anytime it changes hands, you need counter signatures from both parties. And then you also need accurate weight logging and then data logging around the ultimate destruction and disposition of that material. Historically, that's all been done by paper and triplicate copies, carbon copies, sign here, handoff there. And that creates a lot of potential errors and potential issues. So we're seeing an increasing shift towards the digitization of that system. And initially, it's just the digitization of the forms and the form management. But increasingly, we're seeing RFID trackers, barcodes on individual bags or boxes or crates that are allowing kind of real-time visibility into the kind of current location and disposition of any given lot of waste. And so that's just tightening up the system a lot and allowing fewer mistakes to slip through. It's been interesting to see that kind of adoption rolled out because it's been slower and more patchwork than one might imagine. And part of that's just a reflection of kind of the regulatory environment in the US. Most medical waste is regulated at the state level. And so every state will have its own set of regulations. And complying with that state's regulation may be slightly different than complying with the neighboring state's regulation. So that's just makes shifting off of kind of state level paper documentation more of a challenge and slower. The other pieces you alluded to earlier is because this is such it's a logistics challenge in a high stakes environment. It can be, you don't want to try to get a hospital to switch over to a new bagging, tagging, or marking system if it's going to cause delays in them being able to move their waste out the door and start impacting day-to-day operations. For a lot of these haulers and treaters, it's a high volume, low margin operation. So anything that adds incremental cost to the process can be a huge challenge for them to implement. And so while we're seeing kind of these trends play out, we're seeing them move forward in fits and bounds. It's a mix, and answering exactly that question is part of what's kind of keeping some of these changes from being implemented more quickly. Waste management is almost never going to be the highest priority of a hospital. They're typically looking at new medical staff, new nursing staff, new support staff, and waste management is, unless those are all very well positioned, a lower priority. So it's generally a question of finding ways to do more with less. I think it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. I'm optimistic that, particularly for kind of higher value waste streams in the medical waste space, that's going to allow closer tracking and kind of a higher share of it to be decontaminated and recycled and reused in other applications. So I think that has a lot of potential and has the impact to reduce the kind of amount of high grade plastics that are being disposed of currently. There's certainly tighter tracking. There's a industry-wide effort to just get greater visibility into kind of costs at different levels and where different elements of costs are being introduced and what can be done to minimize or drive those down going forwards. The only other piece like I had was when you find stuff on the side of the road, it was either a car accident or they dumped it. And the dumping is why the tracking and the manifesting and the tagging matters, because when it's not tracked and it's not tagged, the cheapest thing to do is to dump it in the creek. As we're talking about tracking and manifesting, there's kind of two pieces to that. And the first is kind of to ensure that the rules are being followed. And that's important because it doesn't happen all that frequently, fortunately, but with some frequency, there are fairly high profile cases, including one out of California recently, where a medical waste transporter and treater was caught just dumping it off the side of the road as a lowest cost of treatment option. And so some of these kind of newer solutions, newer technologies, and manifesting and tracking requirements are being implemented to both minimize and prevent that sort of activity, but also just give everyone involved and the public at large greater sense of, to give everyone involved in the industry and the public at large just more peace of mind that there are rules in place and the rules are being followed, and their health and the health of those around them are being protected. And really what most of medical waste tracking requirements come down to is that accountability, making sure you can identify who's ultimately responsible for that bag of medical waste right there.